I think there's an even bigger form of systemic bias in the United States. It doesn't seem to get a lot of coverage, which is probably why it allows itself to negotiate to the big monstrosity that it is today. So it's probably easiest to describe this bias by my own personal stories. When I was in junior high, I had very different hobbies than most of my classmates. I had already started writing computer programs. I wasn't writing the number one backgammon AI in the world, but I wrote a lot of recreational computer programs. I was 7 years old when I started programming, and my first computer program added up all the numbers from 1 to 100. And when it worked, I went to school and I bragged about it, and nobody wanted to listen. They just thought I was crazy. Well, first of all, the kids didn't understand what I was talking about. The teachers thought I was crazy. And fast forward a couple years later, now the kids understand what I'm doing, but nobody wants to associate with me on that. They all have their own hobbies, right? Now we're talking about the late 1990s. Most of my classmates are into Pokemon, which was introduced around that time. What else is going on? And then when I was in 8th grade, I got fascinated with chemistry. I had learned to make this explosive powder, this oxidizing explosive called sodium chlorate, which you can make with electrolysis. I had made a small amount of this stuff, and I placed it in our fireplace and burnt it. I placed it in a phone book in our fireplace, and I burnt it, and the phone book instantly exploded. I mean, I did it in a very safe way, but even my mom was very upset about that. She doesn't have any chemistry background, which is probably what scared the crap out of her. My dad has a degree in chemistry, and it didn't seem to bother him so much. He just thought that I needed a life, so even he was biased against it. He thought as an 8th grader I needed more of a social life. And I go to school and I brag about it, and my 8th grade science teacher was very upset that I was telling all my classmates about this stuff, because I think he knew that I was doing it safely. He was worried about me encouraging other kids to do this stuff when they might not know how to do it safely. I think that was why he didn't want me talking about it. I got in serious trouble in 8th grade for talking about this stuff. But my classmates were doing other things and they fit right in, right? So I think I had a couple classmates who started smoking cigarettes when they were in 8th grade. They did all sorts of dangerous things. I mean, not explode in your face dangerous, but dangerous in terms of the lifestyle kind of things. And they just fit right in, right? I mean, we all love to take risks in different ways, right? Why is it okay to do drugs or to have unsafe sex, when you're in 8th grade, but it's not so okay to accidentally blow off a finger or two? I don't understand. I mean, we all go through phases in our lives. I mean, my stuff was easier to do in a safe way than their stuff, in my opinion, right? Now, fast forward a few years later in high school. At the time, people did not accept others for being single, especially if you were happily single. If you were single and looking, even then there was a lot of prejudice against that. So I didn't go to prom when I was in high school because you couldn't go as a single guy. Nowadays, I'm recommending people to go as a single guy. I'm a private tutor, and I'm often telling people to go to prom as a single, and it's being something a little bit better. Still not 100%, I would say, but I want to encourage these, especially people who are happily single, right? I think there's more of those people than people who are single and looking nowadays. Okay, now I continued to run into the same problem when I was in college. One thing I discovered when I was in college is that I used to hate with a big passion any sort of projects with teamwork involved in it. And the reason I hated it was because I worked in a very different way than a lot of my peers. See, I get a lot of my work done when I'm not staring at my work, right? So I'm a professor right now, and a lot of times I'll be out and about during my day, and all of a sudden, bam! I know a good way to explain this problem later tonight in class, right? It helps that I'm working remotely now, right? And I can attest here. You know, I used to work at a tech giant as well. Now I'm a professor. I can personally attest. Most of my work gets done outside of the office, away from the computer, and out and about in my life, right? On vacation, during my everyday walk, you know. Anyway, that's how I operate. Unfortunately, that's not how a lot of my peers operate. And so it caused a lot of strife, right? Especially, you got a group project that might involve 3 or 4 classmates. Now, we'll be in the middle of eating in the cafeteria. Oh my god, I have this big idea. Nobody wants to listen to me. They want to relax and eat, right? And then we cram in the office, and I can't think of anything. And long story short, I had a class like that. It was on software design when I was working on my PhD. I think I got a B in that class. My classmates got an A. I think my classmates went up to the professor to complain about my working style. I mean, they didn't say that I worked differently. They just said that I didn't do anything. So, but that was a big problem that I ran into. I think a few years after I graduated with my PhD, I emailed my old professor to explain myself. And he says he has run into other students with similar issues, and he has made some adjustments to the course. So obviously it has been somewhat sorted out over the years. I wouldn't say 100% though, because part of the reason I left the tech giant that I was working at is because of differences like that. The people that I'm working with nowadays are more understanding of my working differences. That's why I can live out here in Phoenix instead of back home in Seattle. I think most of my colleagues now recognize that I operate on a very different basis than a lot of other people. Now, I have dietary restrictions, so not life and death kind of restrictions, but I've had autism my entire life. When I was 16 years old, I quit consuming refined sugar, and I feel so much better. When I was 17 years old, I quit dairy products, milk, and I feel so, especially the milk. Nowadays, if I even come into contact with milk, I get skin rashes. Anyway, so I have to pay attention to that. Now, I handle my dietary restrictions very well. I travel to countries where I don't even speak the language and I can find foods. But other people around me are bothered by the fact that I'm not eating whatever, right? And I don't understand why. I mean, it's not like I disallow them from eating their you know, whatever they like, their comfort foods, right? I don't even want to call it junk foods because that's what they like, right? Now, it's not like, but how about you eat what you like and I eat what I like, right? How about not creating a rift over the fact that I eat differently, right? So for example, here in Phoenix, Arizona, we have a board game club and we meet at the IHOP. I can usually get some salad there, and people are very accepting of that. Back home in Seattle, it wouldn't work so well, I would imagine. Seattle was all in your face about if you don't fit their mold, you're out! Right, that's why I love small town USA. Maybe not so much Phoenix, but I spent 3 months in Wallace, Idaho, and I loved every minute of it. People accepted me for the way I operate, my hobbies, my eating habits, everything. I loved it. I spent 3 days in Lincoln, Montana, and I loved it. The only problem was that there was no, I couldn't get very high-speed internet. But I loved it. When I retire, I'm gonna buy some land and a cabin. I'm gonna live there with no running water or electricity for decades, right? Just like this famous serial killer, but obviously without the killing, right? I loved it. Where else have I been? Missoula, Montana. That's a mix, right? There's a lot of A lot of farmers there, a lot of people who know to live and let live, but you still get the big city environment of going to a bar and all that. So I want people to accept each other for their hobbies, for their choice in diet, for their choice in relationships, with how they work best, right? I see so many people, right now we're in a recession, obviously, a lot of people are losing their jobs, but I think a lot of people lose their jobs not because they're poor performers, but because they're not because they're poor performers overall, but they're poor performers in the context of how we as a society operate, right? If you don't fit the mold, you're out kind of mentality pushes a lot of people out, right? Anyway, that's what I meant by different lives matter, DLM.